Hey, Paul, how you doing? All right. I really appreciate this little written. You kind of describe your experience, and that's fantastic, Paul, because that really tells me exactly where you're at in terms of what you're learning and how you're absorbing the information, which I think you're doing fantastic. These are very, very relevant points. So through experience, you're learning a lot. And I explained why this assignment I think is so very effective because boy, it really you have no choice but to you have no choice but to establish a very intimate relationship with the letter forms if you draw them out by hand. And that is so important. I mean, you could probably just even think back to Banana and you could probably think of characteristics off the top of your head regarding the Franklin Gothic typeface. So if you're ever tasked with using Franklin Gothic for a client project, you're going to go, oh, remember it well, and I know exactly how to kern it, how to space it, and how to establish those spacing relationships. So that's really important. I thought this was interesting too. The serifs were throwing you off. Definitely, absolutely. I think that the tendency for students when moving from kerning sans serif to serif, the tendency is to keep it too wide because you don't want those touching. And you don't, but they can get awful close. Now you can, when these touch, just by way of review, what's it called, Paul, when these touch? When your serifs touch, it's called a ligature. And it's okay to establish ligatures in display type, headline type, but it's not so good to establish ligatures in body copy. At least you don't want it kerned too tightly because what does that do? That creates too much density between the letters and it starts to create ambiguous spacing between letters, which results in ambiguous perception. And anytime there's ambiguity, we know what happens. The eye slows down a little bit and it impedes expeditious reading of the typeset. So that's really important. All right, so that's it. Let's jump in here. I was looking at your letter forms and comparing them, and I think you're just doing really fantastic stuff here. Really good job. Your letter forms are perfect. I got absolutely no problem whatsoever with the craft and the way that letters are represented. They're not perfect, and nor will they ever be, right? But this is just going to give you such a great understanding of kerning on the computer that you jump from manual to computer, and you're like, oh wow, this is really get a great appreciation for the simplicity in letter spacing in digital format once you start going through and really understanding how these letters work and next to each other, specifically those relationships I talked about during week one with a curve next to a curve next to a straight, and a straight next to a straight, right? All right. Let's jump right over here and look at your presentation. Now, one thing I'm seeing, and this is ironic because the student right before you, we had the same kind of weird scenario. Now, I shouldn't call it weird. I should just call it a little bit strange in how this is presented. Now, I'm guessing that you shot this with your camera and didn't scan it. The reason I say that is because it looks like when you shot it, your camera wasn't straight. And the reason I say that is we take a look at the baseline, and I'm going to use this as a straight edge. I'm going to place this side at the bottom of the baseline over here. There it is, and we can see the baseline is not on a true horizontal, right? And I have a feeling that has to do with the way that this is the perspective caused by the photograph, not the way you set it up. So if you set it up with the true horizontal, it would look a little bit different. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just in your presentation, just make sure that this is represented as a true horizontal. All right, let's look at spacing now. So fire and ice, I think the kerning itself is a little bit wide. I think we can close all these letters down. The F, the space between the F, the I and the R, those can all be closed down. Reduce the kerning there a little bit. You can reduce the kerning in between the A, the N, and the N and the D. Okay, so that we need to tighten that down a little bit as well. I think ice is looking pretty good. If anything, maintain that relationship between the C and the E. Remember, you don't want to bring that E too close to the C because that's going to trap that negative space inside that open counter of the C. You don't want that. You want that to be able to breathe. right? So that, I think, is a pretty good relationship. You can close it down a little, but definitely don't want to move it over too much. I mean, it's probably okay the way it is. I am going to recommend it. The more I look at this, I'm thinking that maybe just this space right here can be closed down just a little bit. But I think out of the three words, ice is showing the best letter spacing. Word spacing is a little bit of a problem because, as we can see, we're not seeing this. I'm not seeing this as fire and ice. I'm seeing this as fire and ice. And that is simply due to the spacing between the words. So we talked about letter spacing. Let's look at word spacing. That's really wide. That's really wide, almost to the point where these two words look like they don't have a relationship between each other. And they do, all three do. So let's close those spaces down. Okay, now when you close those spaces down, keep those rules of kerning. Two straights, a straight and a curve, and two curves. Keep those in mind. It's going to be different because they're not right next to each other, but the illusions are still there. Straight, 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 curve, and curve, curve. The illusions are still there that one could be closer than the other, even though they're identical. So you're going to have to manipulate those spaces. I guess what I'm saying is this space here is not going to be identical, although you want it to look like it's consistent. Okay, does that make sense? Same thing as kerning, except this is wider space between the letters, right? So those are my recommendations. Now, just close down your kerning a little bit, make sure that's a true horizontal, and then let's reduce the word spacing a bit, and you are good to go. All right, fantastic job, great craft. Thank you so much for this wonderful written rationale describing your experience with the assignment. And as I said, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to let me know. Thanks, Paul. Looking forward to your final.